There it is. We're live. We're back. It's a beautiful week. Welcome, everybody. We're going to kick this week off by figuring out whether or not polyamory is even right for us. Ooh, this should be interesting. Here we go.
Practicing Polyamory, real-life perspectives from the imperfect people of polyamory. The mission of the Practicing Polyamory podcast is to provide a platform for all of the real-life, flawed humans that practice polyamory so that we might all learn from one another and grow as a community. Enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to this beautiful Monday. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome, and thank you so much for tuning in. And if you've been here for a while, you already know that we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. 3 opportunities every single week for you to ask questions. So if you have any questions about your relationships, or if there's a topic you'd like to hear discussed on the show, slide into my DMs, let me know, or leave a comment while we're recording live. Follow the show on all social media platforms at Practicing Poly. Set up that little bell so that you know when we're going live, because sometimes we go early like today. Let me know what it is that you want us to talk about. And as always, as a reminder, when if you're listening to this podcast, you are a welcome guest to be on the show. None of us are perfect. We are here to share our imperfect stories, because the more stories we share, the more others will see us in themselves. The more representation we have, the more we can strengthen our community. So go to practicingpolyamory.com, sign up for the last few spots of the season to share your imperfect story too. All right, everybody, that's my spiel. Let's introduce today's awesome guest. As someone who grew up in a family that struggled with mental health and depression, today's guest was always drawn to going deep with people, giving them the opportunity to be seen and heard. Her own journey through the psyche began as a way of healing herself and her family, and through her healing, she was inspired to share the possibility of change, undoing past wounds, and dismantling sabotaging patterns with others. For more than 15 years, our guest has been committed to working with clients to identify their internal limitations, master their own empowerment, and fulfill their life's purpose, all while connecting all aspects of your life experience, your body, your mind, and your spirit. Today's guest is a compelling sex-positive psychotherapist who was awarded the San Francisco Bay Guardian's Best Therapist in the Bay in 2017. She's also a playful mother of 2, founder of a national circus performance company, and passionate director of a flourishing dance theater group in the San Francisco area. So, is polyamory a limitation for you or your partner? Tune in today while we discuss signs that may help you discover if polyamory is right for you. Joining us today out of the beautiful San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California, welcome to the show, Maya Lane. Woo!
Woo! Yeah!
We're rocking, we're rolling, we're dancing.
I love it. I didn't expect that. I was like, woo!
Yeah, I like energy. I'm very energetic myself. Awesome. So, I think that when I get into these conversations, I want to get to it from a positive, stance. Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time. I want to get something off the table first and foremost. My very first question to you is, I just want to make sure you're not anti-polyamory, right? Like you're right. You're good with polyamory as a viable, healthy lifestyle that people choose. Yes?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I can say more about that.
Please.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have been part of the community for almost 20 years. I myself was in an open marriage for about a decade with kids. And I do work with a lot of couples who are navigating this. I think that, the beauty of polyamory and the rewards that it can offer, are plenty. A lot of self-growth, self-courage, autonomy, really getting an option away from cheating and lying and divorce, and just giving such a spectrum of what's possible. And also just the exciting, especially in the Bay Area, community, the excitement of forging new ways of being in relationship that are not just according to what mom and dad did, but this
Right.
whole sense of creativity and, being true to yourself and connection and the celebration of connection. And so there's so much that I love about polyamory, and I'm definitely a very kind of sex positive, relationship positive,
Mhm.
poly positive therapist. Definitely. So,
Good. Yeah,
yeah.
I wanted to get that out of the way because, when we approach a topic, when we have a topic that says
Yeah.
how to know if polyamory is right, if it's right for you, I just want to make sure that we're doing it from an
Yeah.
accepting standpoint and not,
Absolutely.
someone who's like, no, nobody should be polyamorous. This is dumb, etc. So that was the first thing that I wanted. And beyond that, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your journey. You mentioned you were in a polyamorous or open marriage yourself for about a decade, and somehow you've discovered that sometimes it's not right for everybody. Is that
Mhm.
what we're getting at today?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So yeah, and again, complete positive approach towards all of this, because I think that everybody's story is different. Um, so a little bit about me. I kind of came from a family that was revolutionaries and artists, and being Israeli American, and communities that were always transgressive. And I've been a performing artist my whole life, and in the drag community and the performance community, the burner community. So I, have been involved in these worlds for many, many years. I was always interested in breaking paradigms and
Hmm.
questioning all of that. And when I met my husband, who we've been together for 20 years, his name's Aaron. It's kind of funny. When I met him, I was dating like 4 different people. I was new to the whole, Bay Area scene, and I was really into it. And, and we met, and we always had this curiosity around, what does this look like? And, we started the adventure with a lot of, curiosity and excitement. We definitely stumbled into it not really knowing, a lot about what we were doing and how to do it well.
Hmm.
I would say at first we were just so expansive and excited about, what's possible, and the turn on,
Hmm.
some
Hmm.
of the best sex we've had ever, just with a
Right.
compersion, and feeling free, and had like a run of a few years where we were just, I even wrote an article about, the wonders of, polyamory and open relationships, and how great it can be for, a relationship. And, um, it's interesting, what I noticed also is that as we were shifting in our relationship, and as I was shifting in who I was, and also my, maturing, various things happening with my sense of self and my body, and, being a mother, our children getting older, things happening for him. There was just a lot of different things that started to develop, and started to make it more challenging, to be in this kind of dynamic with other
Hmm.
people involved. And then I started kind of looking at it also from the perspective of some of the clients I was working with, and kind of seeing certain dynamics with them. And some things that I noticed started to actually hinder our relationship as opposed to like enhance.
Hmm.
One thing that we kind of notice sometimes in kind of therapeutic settings is a term that's called splitting, which is, kind of like a polarization, where like one person's good and the other person's bad. There's a lot of comparing one or the other. And now, of
Hmm.
course, in the ideal realm of, of poly, there's the compersion, there isn't one or the other, the hierarchy, it's very different for each person. But
It's the
I started
ideal.
noticing that, what was that? The
I said
ideal.
that's the ideal.
That's the
Not
ideal,
always
right?
true, but yeah.
Not always true. But then I started noticing how that was kind of happening, and we would take turns, right? Either, the other person was everything, and, I was pushing away from my husband, or vice versa, or
Hmm.
the metamors or the partners were, just kind of like, secondary. And then we were, kind of hierarchically deciding certain things, and we were
Right.
kind of hurting people.
Hmm.
So there was just a lot of this polarization that started feeling a little messy. And we just kind of noticed how, without self-awareness around that, that could hurt a lot of people, and it could
Yeah.
also hurt the relationship. So that was one thing. And the other thing that I noticed was, for me, a lot of unresolved attachment stuff that was coming up, right? Around security. What does security really look like? And I know that right now we're in a really beautiful time of, Jessica Fern's book, Polysecure.
Yep.
We're really kind of talking about like, how can we do this well, where we're really aware of security in poly relationships. So I'm so grateful for that. But it was a topic that wasn't really talked about, like this whole sense of like how this could really start to kind of trigger past attachment wounds. So again, not to say that this community is not talking about this, but I think for us, because we weren't really doing the work to really understand that, it started becoming a bit more challenging, and I would say even kind of destructive around the security, the health. There was some past trauma that was starting to get played out. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that, I believe it really does require for people to have, someone to work with, like have a therapist, to have, guides, to really have like this self-knowledge, and not self-knowledge only from kind of the bypassy ideal, but really self-knowledge into the shadow, right? Into like the crevices that are really challenging, in order to do this well. Because when it's done well, I mean, it really truly is about how do you stand firm in yourself despite what other people are doing, which is so empowering. And I was able to do that at times, and others I wasn't. So those were some things that were, kind of standing out. The other thing that I noticed was like congruency was challenging, right? To have like both people feeling good about it at the same time. And that requires both people having people that they really enjoy connecting with at the same time, which is not always something that can happen. And I've noticed that also with clients, right? One person's like super excited and has all these different partners and is like going off, and the other person is struggling, right? Not meeting the right people, not feeling good about this. So that's also a really interesting place. What do you do there? Do you say like, well, tough, I'm really happy? Do you sacrifice? Do you shift? So we kind of had to do a lot of dancing around that, which was not always easy, because you're kind of asking for someone to either pull away, or, you're affecting other people involved. So there's just a lot of different things. So basically, in a nutshell, what I noticed was like the initial excitement for the first few years is absolutely there, but then it's really interesting to see how it kind of like transpires over time. And then it makes sense that sometimes, you kind of go back to, is this the best thing for us?
Yeah.
And it's okay to like shift gears a little bit, not necessarily completely eradicate it, because I think he and I are both still curious about who knows in the future, but just kind of like intentionally making a choice. Like right now, what feels right is to choose this, kind of choosing one another and kind of sacrificing certain things, as an option too.
I like it. There's so much there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy crap, we only have 30 minutes.
I
How are we
know.
gonna pack all of this? This is insane. There's so much. I mean, some of the things that I was writing down as you were talking was how it can be challenging when there are other people involved. And you started mentioning the hierarchy. Then you use that word shadow, which I love. I don't know if you follow Jessica Levity over at Remodeled.
No.
At Remodeled Love on Instagram. She's awesome, very, very funny and charming, and smart as a whip too. But she's doing a lot of work on this shadow, work. And I feel like some of the things that you were talking about, the hierarchy, the imbalance of dates and relationships, if one person is feeling insecure because they don't have the same number of dates, or they don't have as good of a relationship, separate from I guess that inherent main one, that's all shadow work. So I want to ask you about how your education and your work in psychotherapy affected your relationship. I assume that, you were open during at least a part of it,
Mhm.
and you were learning all kinds of new things. You had gotten the education, and you started working with clients who presumably were also polyamorous. And I've said this before, where it's difficult or nearly impossible, really, to separate yourself completely from your work. So the things that you experience at home in
Mhm.
your own personal
That's true.
life, you bring to work, and then the things that you learn from your clients, you bring back home into your personal life. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, and some of the things that you were learning and going through, that kind of, it sounds like, encouraged you or inspired you to take a step back from polyamory for yourself
Mhm.
and just say, you know what, maybe this isn't the right thing for us right now. What are some of those things that you learned?
Yeah, right. Like we said, this could go on for hours. There's so
Yeah.
much there. um, well, I mean, this is gonna kind of sound, I would say, challenging to the support of polyamory. But one thing that I learned, and I kind of saw this with couples, which is interesting, was that sometimes it was more difficult to really say no and ask for what you wanted, and there's a lot of shadow in that. Like for me, for instance, it was hard for me to say, this is hurting me and I want you to just focus on me, and this is what I want. I think
Mhm.
that part of what I was doing was kind of like, oh sure, we could do this. It was kind of accommodating, right? It's like there's a lot of shadow work there, because I wasn't really standing firm in myself until I started doing some work and realized maybe I didn't value myself, right? Maybe I
Mhm.
had like parts of me that were rejecting who I was, that made it really difficult to actually come in and say, I don't want this and this is difficult. So that's, one thing that stands out for me. And I've seen that
That's
also
perfect.
with,
Actually, if
yeah,
if we can, let's stay on that, since we are kind
yeah,
of, limited on time. So
yeah,
let's
yeah.
stay on that. And like immediately, the question that I have for that is, well, at what point do I say, well, this is what's good for me, this is what I want, uh, you know, partner, I need you to pay more attention to me because I'm hurting.
Mm.
At what point do we find that balance between my partner needs to pay attention to me versus I need to give my partner freedom? Like, whose responsibility is it really? Is it my responsibility to do the shadow work and,
Hmm.
figure out how to get those
Yeah.
needs fulfilled? Or do I actually have to call on my partner and say, hey, look, this isn't working for whatever reason, and we need to scale back and just be monogamous again? How do we make that
Yeah.
decision? How do we make that distinction?
That's a really great question. And I think that's a difficult one. And I would say that it's a both and,
Hmm.
because sometimes I feel like it can feel a bit narcissistic also at times, to the pursuit of what I want and what feels good for me, especially when it comes to partnership. I think it's a
Hmm.
both and, where absolutely I agree with you. There has to be your own work, your own shadow work that's
Right.
necessary. And that's kind of my bottom line, is that both people really need to do that work. And I do believe that in order to have a partnership, there is like a balance of sacrifice. There's a lot of sacrifice that I do in order to be in the relationship. And I think that asking of your partner of that, sacrifice is not easy, but I do believe that in order to have a sustainable relationship, there has to be some of that. And I think
Hmm.
that we all come from a time where we kind of have seen like the negative version of that, with our moms and dads, where the sacrifice really meant not having your autonomy in your life. It meant, especially for women, certain things about sacrifice. So that's not the paradigm I'm coming from. I think I hold a different kind of paradigm that's more kind of sacred. It's like being of service kind of sacrifice, that sometimes you do say, hey, you know what? I know that this is really not your ideal, but this is what I need. Not
Hmm.
for you to fix my issues, but for me to stand firm in my value, to say, come stand with me. So I think, again, it's a both and sort of thing, because that's going to look
Sure.
very different for each person, right?
Yeah. The word that comes to mind as you're describing all of this is hierarchy, and you mentioned it. We talked a little bit about it. Are you of the opinion that hierarchy is inherent in polyamory?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that, there's a lot of relationship anarchists, people
Uh-huh.
who are really interested in not having the hierarchy and really interested in, again, what I and we both really fell in love with, which is the loving more, right? The
Mm-hmm.
more it is kind of, you can be so in love and so connected to one person, and then another person, you can be so in love and so connected to them, and there is no hierarchy. That is beautiful, because it just kind of shows that you're in this divine love connection, right? Love has no form, it's just kind of channeling through you. So again, I love that. That's in the ideal.
Right.
When it comes to the practice,
Mm-hmm. Two different
at
things.
least very different things. But again, we came at it from a particular model, which is not what everyone's going to do. Ours
Right.
was, we're married, we have kids, you're my king, I'm your queen. Like, we did have a hierarchy, we
Okay.
even use those terms. Like, there was this sense of like, our relationship does come first.
Okay.
And then, from there, I think that it is interesting, because what does that mean for other people, and the vetoing and
Mm-hmm.
their importance, and like that model, I would say was, it was challenging to kind of keep that within all of this, for us at least.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with a hierarchical model, right? I think that, especially like what you were talking about, you're married, you have kids, you share finances, potentially had home together, all of these different things
Yeah.
that, you know, it carries weight,
Yes.
right? Whether people want to admit it or not, like that stuff carries weight. And
Mm.
so to say, we need to protect this relationship, it's in a lot of ways self-preservation too,
Yeah.
right? So I don't necessarily think that there's anything inherently wrong with a hierarchical model, but I think that if there how do I guess, like, what I'm thinking is that if there is that hierarchy, then then it causes its own set of problems in polyamory, like what you were talking about,
Yeah.
with making sure that there's enough time for all of these different things, which again,
Yeah.
you kind of expect. If you've got kids, you got to make time for your kids. Like, you got to do it. That doesn't matter how many partners you have. Like, these are your kids.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So very cool, very cool. The other thing that you said was polyamory potentially requires a therapist or a coach. Tell me a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I think that, honestly, it can be done. It could be a lot of fun. I know a lot of people are, have a lot of fun with it. But to do it well, in my opinion, I think that, you need to know about your trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know about, you need to be conscious of what you might be playing out, as opposed to stepping into consciously.
Okay.
I think that there is some need to really look at attachment, because I've seen, both for myself as well as clients, pretty severe, abandonment crises,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pain, really kind of losing it and having a really hard time, and just being so triggered, um, because of unresolved and uninvestigated, attachment wounds. And so I think that the more that people can know about it, and not only know about it, but again, I loved what you were saying, like, know how to work with it. Like, it really is up to you to find that center and that healing and the resource. Like, all of that stuff doesn't come inherently to us, right?
For sure.
Sometimes we get, oof, we get the overwhelm, but then we're like, what the hell do I do with this? And ideally, a therapist is going to be, okay, great. So this is a part of you, but what about this other part, that is resourced and is okay? Can we have that available? So I think that with guidance, people can absolutely find tools of how to really center. And again, to come back full circle to, my love of polyamory, when it's done I love using tarot archetypes, and the magician always comes to me, right? That when it's done in a magicianly kind of way, right? Which is like, I have strength, I have consciousness, I have power, I have choice, and I'm the one that's in charge of knowing how to use that, right? So when there is someone that can help you with it, it could be done really well. And without it, it could be very hurtful to you and others. I think that we've left a trail of people who were hurt because we weren't really thinking about that. And I don't think that's fair to a lot of people who enter into this.
For sure. And as you were saying that, the abandonment, the pain, the attachment wounds, all of these things, the clients that you deal with, the question that popped into my mind was, isn't that true of any relationship that someone might get into? I mean, is it any harder to, or is it any more required to get into a poly relationship for somebody who's dealing with these deep abandonment or attachment wounds? Or should they be doing that for any relationship? I mean, it feels like it doesn't matter to me. Yes, and I love it. Great answer.
I mean, I agree absolutely with you that everyone is going to encounter that in any relationship, even like monogamous, safe relationships. That shit's going to happen. So people need that in general. So that's period. I will argue, though, that when you are inviting in more people into your world, I think it's even more necessary, because there's something about the container, even though, again, it's broken, people cheat and divorce, the container of the choice of marriage. When you're opening it and you're bringing in other people's psyches, other people's traumas, other people's projections, other people's needs, other people's energy, that's a whole hot house of other people that are intentionally being brought in. I believe that's a very different animal that absolutely needs some containment, or else it can really blow up, I think.
Makes perfect sense. I mean, I was just asking because it's like, if somebody's hurting like that, it doesn't matter what kind of a relationship they're in. They probably need some help regardless. But when you talk about, other people being added on top of just the one relationship, yeah, absolutely. Then it just complicates it even further. And, we go from there. Maya, we're running low on time here, running short on time. So I know we could talk for hours about all this stuff. It's been such a great conversation already. Is there anything that I missed? Is there anything that you wish that I would have asked you, or some final thoughts that you might want to leave with our audience today?
No, I mean, I think that we covered it, and it was a short amount of time. I think we covered a lot. I think that this is just kind of like an encouragement and a support for this journey. Could be so enriching, and it's always good to have like the right mentor to help you do it well. And and that's pretty much it. And I love this community. I love being a part of it. I'm so grateful that it exists, because it holds such courage and playfulness and deliciousness and so much that I really love. So
I love it. Thank you. And if anybody from the community wanted to get in touch with you, talk with you, maybe make an appointment, what's the best way, especially for our listening audience, because not everybody can see the video?
Absolutely. So you could always reach me through my website, which is mayalane.net, MAYALANE.net. And you could always check in with me, and I would love to even, I wouldn't say I'd love to chat with everyone because I'm pretty busy, but, it would be great to hear from people and any questions people have. And if you're ever interested in having a session, I'm honored to work with people on this journey.
Perfect.
Okay.
Maya, again, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you, as always, to our live audience for tuning in. Robbie, thanks so much for saying hi, leaving a comment.
Hello.
As a reminder, when we're live, you get no commercial interruptions, but the same can't be said for those podcast downloads. So if you want to avoid the commercial interruptions, be sure to catch us live Monday through Wednesday, 2:30 Pacific time. Sorry, today we started a little early, but set that reminder, set that bell so you know if we start early or have an extra day on a Thursday. Or sign up for Patreon. You'll get access to our commercial-free RSS feed and support the show. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, wherever it is that you download your podcast. If you haven't already, please leave us a review. We'll really appreciate it. That's all we've got for you all today. Thank you so much. And as always, until tomorrow.
Have a nice day!
Thank you for tuning in to the Practicing Polyamory podcast. Would you or someone in your polycule like to be a guest? Sign up at practicingpolyamory.com and join the conversation. Please support us by subscribing, liking, and following us on social media at Practicing Polya by clicking any of the affiliate links on our website or by subscribing at patreon.com/practicingpolya.